My best friend and my girlfriend betrayed me for 6 months, but when I got an anonymous email with evidence, I discovered this wasn't the first time he did this and left them destroyed. I'm 27 years old. I work in finance, and what I'm about to tell you basically destroyed my ability to trust the people closest to me. I guess I should start at the beginning. When I met Natalie about 3 years ago, though, honestly, I keep wondering if any part of that relationship was real or if from day one it was just part of some sick plan I didn't even know existed. I met Natalie at this coffee shop near my office where I'd go every morning before work. She was a barista. She was 24 at the time, and she was studying for a master's degree in marketing. She was pretty, you know, in that natural, effortless kind of way, and she always had this smile that made Monday mornings a little less horrible. For 3 months, we literally just talked about coffee and the weather and random stuff, like how busy the coffee shop was, or if I'd tried the new blend they had. Until one day, I worked up the courage to ask for her number. She said yes almost immediately, and I remember thinking, okay, maybe I'm not as bad at this dating thing as I thought. The first few weeks were perfect. I mean, the kind of perfect that makes you feel like you're in those cheesy movies you normally hate but secretly like. We'd go out to dinner, watch movies at my apartment. She met my friends, and I met hers. My family has money. Quite a bit of money, actually. And I work in finance, so I guess I have a comfortable life. But Natalie never seemed impressed by that in the wrong way. You know? Like she enjoyed me taking her to nice places, but she was also happy ordering pizza and watching Netflix. And that made me feel like she liked me, not my wallet. This is where Carter comes in. Carter had been my best friend since high school, like one of those friends you meet when you're 16 and you assume is going to be in your life forever. He was 26. He'd opened his own gym about 2 years earlier, and he'd always been the friend everyone wanted to have. Charismatic, funny, the kind of person who lights up a room when he walks in. Obviously, I introduced him to Natalie about a month into us dating, because that's what you do when your best friend and your girlfriend are important people in your life, right? I thought they'd get along well. They got along too well. But at the time, I didn't see it that way. Carter was super nice to her from the start. He'd ask about her studies, give her advice about marketing for her master's, and when Natalie mentioned she wanted to start working out, Carter immediately offered her free membership at his gym. I thought, great. My girlfriend's going to get in shape and my best friend is being generous. Everyone wins. God, I was such an idiot. Natalie started going to Carter's gym like 3 or 4 times a week. At first, I'd go with her sometimes, like on weekends when I had time. But between my work and her master's classes, she usually went alone during the week. Carter assigned her a trainer, a guy named Jason who seemed professional and serious, so I wasn't worried. The first few weeks, Natalie would come home excited, telling me about her routines and how much weight she'd lifted. And I was happy for her. Honestly. But after like 2 months, I started noticing weird things. Small things at first, like Natalie was spending more time at the gym than seemed necessary. She'd say she was going for an hour but would come home 2 or 3 hours later. When I'd ask her, she'd say she'd stayed stretching or chatting with the other girls at the gym, or that she'd stopped to buy something on the way. She always had an explanation that sounded reasonable, so I'd nod and move on with my day. Her phone became like an extension of her body. Before she'd leave it on the table when we ate or on the couch when we watched TV. But suddenly she always had it in her hand, screen down, and she'd get weird if I came near when she was texting. Once I tried to peek at what she was writing, and she literally exited the chat so fast, I only saw a flash of screen. When I asked her what was up, another reasonable explanation that made me feel like a paranoid person for even asking. Carter also started acting different, but in a more subtle way. He'd talk to me more often about Natalie, like how she was doing at the gym, what exercises she was doing, how she was progressing. At first I thought he was just being a good friend and a good gym owner, caring about his clients. But there was something about the way he talked about her that made me uncomfortable. Like he knew her better than he should, you know what I mean? He'd comment on things about her musical tastes or about conversations they'd had that I didn't even know had happened. One night, like 6 months after Natalie started going to the gym, she got home almost at 11 p.m. She'd said she was going to a training session at 7 p.m. 4 hours. I asked her what happened, and she said that after the gym she'd gone to study at the library with classmates from her master's, and her phone had died, so that's why she hadn't let me know. Her hair was wet from the gym shower, and she smelled like that cheap soap they have in the locker rooms, and she was wearing clean workout clothes she'd clearly put on after training. Everything added up, except something in my stomach told me something was wrong. I started paying more attention after that. I noticed that Natalie always scheduled her gym sessions at specific times, usually afternoons or evenings, and always during the week. On weekends when I could go with her, suddenly she wasn't as interested in going. She'd say she was tired or had homework or wanted to spend time with me at home, which sounded nice but was super different from her obsessive routine during the week. Carter had a girlfriend, Rebecca, who I met a couple times at group hangouts. She was nice and seemed really in love with him. She'd always talk about how hardworking Carter was and how the gym took so much of his time, but she understood because it was his passion. Once she mentioned that Carter worked until super late some days, like until 11 or 12 at night, because he had to do paperwork and administration after they closed. When she said it, something in my brain clicked, but not in a complete way, more like a feeling of unease I couldn't explain. The straw that broke the camel's back was one day I got out of work early, like at 3 p.m., because I'd finished a big project and my boss told me to take the rest of the day off. I decided to stop by the coffee shop where I'd met Natalie because I hadn't been there in months. I'd started buying coffee closer to my office for convenience. I went in and sat in a corner with my laptop thinking I'd work a bit on personal stuff, and like 20 minutes later I heard Natalie's voice. She was at a table on the other side of the coffee shop with two girls I assumed were her friends, from her masters. It wasn't my intention to spy, seriously, but they were talking loud enough that I couldn't help but overhear. One of the friends asked her how things were going with me, and Natalie laughed. In this way, I'd never heard from her, like condescending and mocking, and said something like, I was useful, and things were going well. Useful. That word stuck with me. Then one of the friends asked about the gym, and Natalie lowered her voice, but not enough, and said that Carter was incredible, that he was her real passion, and she hoped things would work out the way she wanted. The friends laughed, and one said something about keeping it secret, and Natalie responded that, obviously, she wasn't stupid. I froze. I literally couldn't move. My brain was trying to process what I'd just heard, but it was like the words didn't make sense. Carter was her real passion? Keeping it secret? I got up as quietly as I could and left the coffee shop before they saw me. I walked like 6 blocks, aimlessly with my heart beating so hard. I thought I was going to throw up right there on the street. When I got home like 2 hours later, Natalie was already there, getting ready to go to the gym. She saw me and smiled at me like nothing, asked me how my day had been. I decided to confront her directly because I couldn't keep pretending. I asked her what she'd been doing in the afternoon, and she told me she'd been at the library studying. I told her I'd seen her at the coffee shop and her face changed completely, like she turned pale and then red, and she asked me why I hadn't gone to say hi. I told her I'd heard her conversation, that I'd heard what she said about Carter. Natalie's reaction was weird. She didn't get defensive immediately like I expected. First, she laughed, like nervous, and told me I'd misunderstood, that she was talking about something else, that Carter was helping her with a marketing project, and that's why he was important to her. I told her that's not how it had sounded, that she'd used the word passion, and her friends had mentioned keeping it secret. Then she did get defensive and accused me of being paranoid, of spying on her, of not trusting her. She told me that if I checked her phone, I'd see there was nothing wrong. But when I asked her to show me her messages with Carter, she flat out refused. She said it was an invasion of privacy, and that if I didn't trust her, then maybe we shouldn't be together. That's when I realized I was being manipulated, or gaslighted as they say now, but in the moment it made me doubt myself. Was I being paranoid? Had I misunderstood the conversation? Natalie ended up going to the gym that night anyway, crying and saying she needed space to think about whether she wanted to be with someone who didn't trust her. I stayed in the apartment feeling like the worst person in the world. The next day I decided to talk to Carter. I went to the gym at 10 a.m. when I knew it wouldn't be that busy. Carter greeted me with his usual smile, hugged me, and asked me what happened because Natalie had told him we'd fought. That already seemed weird to me. Like, why would Natalie run to tell my best friend about our fight before I even had a chance to talk to him? I told him what I'd heard at the coffee shop, and Carter laughed. He laughed in my face and told me I was being ridiculous. He explained that he'd been helping Natalie with a project for her master's about gym marketing, and that's why they'd been talking so much. That everything was completely professional, and Rebecca knew all about it. Rebecca was there that day, helping at the gym reception, and when Carter called her over to confirm his story, she basically made me feel like a paranoid idiot. She told me Carter had told her everything about the project with Natalie, that she thought it was great he was helping his best friend's girlfriend with her studies, and that I should be grateful to have such a generous friend. The two of them looked at me, with this expression of pity mixed with disappointment, and I left there feeling worse than when I'd arrived. Natalie came home that night with flowers and food from my favorite restaurant. She apologized for reacting badly, told me she understood why I'd misunderstood things, and that she loved me. She explained in detail the marketing project she was supposedly doing with Carter, showed me some documents on her laptop that looked legitimate, and basically love-bombed me so hard that she convinced me everything had been a misunderstanding. I felt relieved, honestly, because I wanted to believe they weren't cheating on me. I wanted to believe my best friend and my girlfriend wouldn't do that to me. But the weird things didn't stop. Natalie kept going to the gym at the same suspicious times, kept being super protective of her phone, and Carter kept mentioning things about her that I didn't understand how he knew. One day, Carter casually commented that Natalie loved a certain song that I'd never heard her mention she liked. When I asked Natalie about it later, she told me she must have mentioned it to Carter in some casual conversation, and that I probably didn't pay attention when she talked to me about her musical tastes. Again, she made me feel like the problem was me. Like 3 more months passed of this sick dynamic, where I constantly doubted my own perception of reality. My friends noticed I was weird, like quieter and more stressed, but I didn't know how to explain to them what was happening without sounding like a paranoid, jealous person. Plus, every time I tried to talk to Natalie about my concerns, she found a way to turn the situation around and make me feel guilty for not trusting her or for being controlling. Then one day I got a message from an unknown number. It was from a girl named Tiffany who worked with Natalie at the coffee shop. The message said she needed to talk to me about something important related to Natalie that she'd been wanting to tell. Did me something for weeks, but didn't know how to contact me until she finally got my number from another employee. She sent me screenshots of conversations she'd had with Natalie, where Natalie basically admitted she had something going on with someone, but not who I thought, and that her schedule at the coffee shop was convenient because it gave her free time at specific hours that coincided perfectly with gaps in Carter's training schedule at the gym. The screenshots showed that Natalie had lied to the coffee shop manager about having classes at certain times so she could have those afternoons off. But Tiffany knew Natalie didn't have classes at those hours because they'd been classmates the previous semester. Tiffany had started to suspect when she saw that the hours Natalie asked off coincided exactly with the days and times she supposedly went to the gym, and when she subtly confronted Natalie about it, Natalie confessed while laughing that she was seeing someone in secret but couldn't say who because the situation was complicated. I felt like I'd been kicked in the stomach. I called Tiffany and we talked for like an hour. She told me Natalie had been acting super suspicious at work, like getting messages that made her smile in that way. People smile when they're excited about someone. And that she'd heard Natalie talking on the phone once in the storage room saying things like, "I miss you, and I can't wait to see you." Tiffany said she'd hesitated to contact me because she didn't want to get involved in other people's business, but that she finally decided to do it because if she were in my position, she'd want someone to tell her the truth. After hanging up with Tiffany, I called Jason, the trainer at Carter's gym, who'd been working with Natalie. I didn't know what to expect from that call, but Jason was surprisingly honest with me. He told me he'd noticed weird things between Carter and Natalie for months. That sometimes when his shift ended, he'd see Natalie still at the gym, supposedly waiting for Carter to close, and that once he'd come back because he'd forgotten his hoodie and had seen Natalie entering Carter's private office in the back of the gym. Jason said at the time he hadn't thought much of it because he assumed it was something related to the supposed marketing project, but when he thought about it later, it seemed weird that those meetings were always so late at night. I asked Jason for a huge favor. I asked him if he could get me access to the gym's security footage. Jason hesitated a lot because technically that could get him in trouble. But after I explained the whole situation to him and showed him the screenshots Tiffany had sent me, he agreed to help me. He told me the security cameras recorded 24/7, and that although they didn't cover the inside of Carter's office, they did cover the hallway leading to that office. 2 days later, Jason sent me several video clips from the last few weeks. The videos showed exactly what he described: Natalie entering Carter's office after the gym closed, usually around 10 or 11 p.m., and leaving hours later, like 1 or 2 a.m. In one of the videos, you could clearly see Carter looking around to make sure there was no one else before letting Natalie in. And in another video, you could see them leaving together and Carter giving her a kiss on the forehead before she left. The timestamps on the videos matched perfectly with the days. Natalie had said she was staying late, studying at the library, or had extra long gym sessions. I didn't cry when I saw the videos. I should have cried, but I think I was beyond shock at that point. It was more like a feeling of numbness mixed with this strange clarity. Like I finally had proof that I wasn't crazy. That all this time my instincts had been correct and they'd been the ones who'd manipulated me into doubting myself. I waited for Natalie to come home that night. I had a copy of the videos on my laptop and Tiffany's screenshots printed, out on the table. When she walked in, I was sitting on the couch with all the evidence material in front of me. She immediately knew something was wrong from my face. I asked her one last time if she had anything to tell me, if she wanted to be honest about what had been going on. She looked me straight in the eyes and told me she didn't know what I was talking about, that she'd been at the library all afternoon. I showed her the videos. I literally put the laptop in front of her and hit play on the most damning video. The one showing her leaving Carter's office at 1:47 a.m. with messy hair and all her clothes disheveled. Natalie's face went through like 5 different emotions in 10 seconds. Shock, panic, anger, and finally something I can only describe as calculation. Like she was trying to think what story she could make up to get out of this. She tried to say the videos didn't show anything wrong, that she'd been helping Carter with gym paperwork and that's why she'd been there so late. I asked her why she needed to help him with paperwork until 1 a.m. when he had a girlfriend and employees who could do that. She had no answer for that. I showed her the screenshots of her conversations with Tiffany, where she basically admitted she was seeing someone in secret. She tried to say Tiffany had misunderstood, that she was joking, that she was actually talking about a surprise she was planning for me. I told her to leave. I told her to pack her things and get out of my apartment right now. Natalie completely changed strategies then and tried to cry and beg, saying we could talk about this, that things weren't what they seemed, that she loved me and didn't want to lose me. I repeated that she should leave, and that if she didn't do it voluntarily, I'd call the police. She left that night, taking only the essentials and promising to come back for the rest of her stuff later. I blocked Natalie on everything that same night. I also blocked Carter without even giving him an explanation, because frankly I didn't owe him anything. Rebecca called me the next day asking what had happened, that Carter was confused about why I'd blocked him. I told her everything. Sent her the videos, the screenshots, all the evidence I had. There was a long silence on the line, and then she told me I was wrong, that there must be another explanation, that Carter would never do that to her. She hung up before I could respond. I spent the next few days feeling like a zombie. I'd go to work, do my job, come home, and sit on the couch staring at the wall. My friends tried to contact me, but I ignored them all because I didn't know how to explain that my best friend and my girlfriend had been betraying me for months, and that I'd been too stupid to see it earlier. Like a week after I broke up with Natalie, I received an email from an anonymous account. The email had an attachment with dozens of screenshots, additional videos, and audio recordings. The message said something like, "You've been the victim of systematic manipulation, and you deserve to know the whole truth." The files showed conversations between Carter and Natalie going back to literally 2 weeks after I'd introduced Natalie to Carter. The conversations were disturbing on a level I didn't expect. They weren't just messages from 2 people having an affair. They were messages showing that Carter had been obsessed with Natalie from the moment he met her, that he'd actively planned to separate her from me from the beginning. There were messages where Carter told Natalie things like, "He doesn't deserve you. I know how to treat you better. Just give me time, and I'll show you how it should be." There were messages where Natalie would doubt and say she felt guilty about cheating on me. And Carter would manipulate her, saying I was controlling and she deserved to be happy, that he understood what she needed in a way I never could. But the most disturbing thing was discovering this wasn't the first time Carter had done something like this. The anonymous file included information about at least 2 other friends of Carter's who'd lost touch with him after suspicious situations with their girlfriends. There was a screenshot conversation between Carter and a mutual friend from years ago where Carter basically admitted he liked the challenge of conquering his friend's girlfriends, that there was something exciting about the manipulation and deception. The friend had told him he was sick and needed help, and Carter had responded that it was just a game and no one really got hurt. The audio recordings were even worse. There was a recording of Carter talking to someone, maybe a friend or accomplice, laughing about how he'd manipulated me into doubting my own perception, about how every time I started to suspect he found a way to make me feel guilty or paranoid. He said things like, "It's too easy. He trusts me too much. He's never going to believe I could do this to him." He talked about Natalie, like she was a trophy he'd won, not like a real person with feelings. Whoever sent me that email also included evidence of how Carter had manipulated other people to make me doubt myself. Rebecca wasn't involved in the conspiracy, but Carter had used her, feeding her stories about how I was paranoid and jealous, so she'd defend him when I confronted him. Jason, the trainer, didn't know the extent of what was happening either, but Carter had kept him busy at specific times so he wouldn't see certain things. The email ended saying that the person who sent it to me had been a victim of Carter in a similar way years ago and had spent years collecting evidence about Carter's pattern of behavior, hoping that someday they could help other victims. I didn't know who this person was, but I'll be eternally grateful to them for giving me that validation, for proving to me I wasn't crazy, that everything had been real and calculated. Today, almost a year after all this, I'm still processing what happened. I went to therapy for months to deal with the trauma of being so systematically manipulated by 2 people I trusted completely. My therapist told me what Carter and Natalie did to me has a name. It's called coordinated gaslighting or conspiracy abuse, and it's one of the most damaging forms of psychological manipulation because it attacks your basic sense of reality and trust. I haven't talked to either of them again. I heard from mutual friends that Carter and Natalie stayed together for a few months after everything exploded, but that they eventually ended in a disaster of drama. Rebecca finally left Carter after other friends showed her evidence similar to what I'd received. Tiffany and Jason both left their jobs related to them. Tiffany found a better job at another coffee shop, and Jason opened his own personal training gym. I still have trouble trusting people. Every time I start dating someone new or when I introduce someone important to my friends, there's a part of me that panics, thinking it's all going to happen again. I know it's not rational. I know not all people are like Carter and Natalie, but that fear is there anyway. My therapist says it's normal. That betrayal trauma, especially when it comes from multiple close sources, leaves deep scars that take time to heal. What bothers me most to this day isn't so much that they cheated on me, though that hurts horribly, but that they enjoyed doing it. That Carter found pleasure in manipulating me, in making me doubt myself, in systematically destroying my confidence. That Natalie actively participated in that game, knowing the damage she was causing. That's what keeps me awake some nights, wondering how someone can be so cruel to a person who just wanted to love them. I guess if anything good came out of this, it's that now I trust my instincts more. When something feels wrong, it probably is wrong, and I'm not going to let anyone convince me otherwise again. I also learned there are good people in the world, like Tiffany and Jason and that anonymous person who sent me the evidence. People who help you without expecting anything in return simply because it's the right thing to do. That gives me hope that maybe someday I can fully trust someone again. I'm not there yet, but I'm working on it.